I have a question for you. I want to show you something, actually. What am I drawing? Rather simple. Not very distorted, but I think you can probably guess, huh? I'll give you a hint. Yeah. Well, it should be obvious at this point. We're talking about Nike. That swoosh is worth something to Nike. And oddly enough, protecting that swoosh has been one of the biggest challenges Nike has had when it's engaged in international trade, especially in developing countries. The idea that a picture of something or a symbol actually means something beyond it just being a picture is a uniquely Western concept. When they trade in a lot of developing countries, namely in places like China, they didn't have the same sort of legal traditions, and so this idea that a picture of something might actually have some sort of value other than the picture itself seems a little bit odd. Take this brand Spalding, or a similar brand, Converse, that features stars on the shoes. Just because there's stars on the shoes, does it mean that the Chinese government now has ownership of it because there's a star on their flag? Reebok offers a picture of a British flag sometimes. Does that mean that the British government should have some sort of control over Reebok? Does the Beatles' picture on my shirt signify that they actually own the shirt? This may not seem like a big deal, and these may seem like really stupid questions, but when it comes to understanding trade in terms of international law, these are very important questions. When you have a Western tradition of intellectual property and how that fits into the law, and it comes head-to-head with a more collectivist idea that if somebody comes up with something that's art or a product of some kind, and it's designated as public ownership, then you have a clear conflict. The notion of intellectual private property is not necessarily assumed by every state in the international system. So this becomes a big deal. It certainly became a big deal when it came to considering whether or not China was going to become part of the World Trade Organization. An interesting question to think about, actually, is to what extent are we going to be able to insist upon these standards of international law while we struggle with the very same issues in our own country based on increased access to intellectual property via the internet, and the question of whether or not this should be something that's freely available or whether or not people should pay for the intellectual property.